Okay, today we talk about America's food crisis, which is based on my new book called America's Food Pandemic, The Hidden Crisis. Before we start, my name is David Reinprecht. I'm a functional nutritionist, biohacker, master trainer, and longevity coach. I help people live healthier and longer lives. I'm also an author of two books. You can see on the screen, this is my first book, From Chubby Kid to Longevity Hero. This book is based on my life, how I got into fitness and nutrition at a very early age, at 13 years old. When a girl was hurting my feelings, and I was 13 years old, she said straight in my face, "Where do you think I'm going to go with you? Look at you, you're fat." And that was the beginning of my career. From that moment on, I want to know everything about fitness, nutrition, how to build muscles, how to burn fat. And in this book, it's all in there, how I got to, become a longevity coach, fitness trainer, nutrition expert, and so on. And then also I give a lot of tips on skin rejuvenation and, of course, on how to turn back the clock and look and feel younger. My second book that just got launched about a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago, America's Food Pandemic, The Hidden Crisis, which is the perfect timing for that. It's a bestseller on Amazon. You can check it out. And this book is based on my talk today. Now remember, whatever I say today, it's a small portion. In the book, you have all the details. Go to Amazon and check it out. All right, before we start about the nutrition, I want to give you a little bit of history. How did America get the title as being the sickest country in the world, having the most chronic diseases, cancer rising year after year? Well, it started in the 80s when tobacco companies such as Archer Reynolds and Philip Morris bought those processed food companies. If you remember, in the 80s, that's when they had all the lawsuits happening and the government got involved and told the people, hey, smoking is actually bad for you. It causes cancer and heart disease. And people listened and stopped smoking. As a result, they lost billions of dollars. And they had to come up with an idea to make up for the loss. From a company point of view, they had a genius idea. For us consumers, not so much. They bought, those Kraft and all the sister companies and many, other processed food companies, and they applied the same principles. As a matter of fact, the same scientists that get you hooked on cigarettes and applied that to food. And that was the birth of ultra-processed food, which dominates the market today. About 70% of Americans eat ultra-processed foods in some shape and form every single day. They engineered the bliss point, which is basically the perfect ratio of salt, sugar, and fats. When you eat that food, it releases dopamine. The same dopamine that gets released when you do drugs, smoke cigarettes, or drink alcohol. And that's why it's so difficult to, get off that kind of food. The lobbying power, we got to mention that too, because the food industry spends 5 times more than the oil industry. And they paid off the FDA, the USDA, and many academic institutions to overlook the harmful effects of processed foods. And as a result, we ended up with a food pyramid that looks like this. I remember when the food pyramid came out, every influencer talked about this because nobody could believe that the government would actually release something like this and recommend it to the Americans as health food. It's like I'm almost like speechless. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to be a nutritionist to see that what is wrong with this picture. When you look at this food pyramid, this is not a food pyramid you should follow. This is an advertising campaign for processed food companies. You can see that there's so much money involved, and institutions and lobbying maker got paid off. Okay, let's go through it a little bit. First, we have watermelon. Yes, it can be natural and healthy, again, but it's high in sugar. And if you combine it with the rest of it, because 90% on here is ultra processed food. Kale, they added kale, but we know it's not such a superfood because it's high in um, oxalates and it can cause joint pain. Frosted mini wheats, again, ultra processed foods packed with pesticides, chemicals, high in sugar. Unsweetened almond milk can be okay, in moderation. Non-fat frozen yogurt. Again, whenever you see a product that says non-fat or low fat, it's probably high in sugar because we only have two flavor mechanisms to play around with, either fat or sugar. Chocolate covered almonds. Why chocolate covered? Why not almonds? Honey nut Cheerios, dates, sweet potato fries, chips, egg substitute fries, vegetable oil, and then they throw in skinless, chicken breast, and then followed by Lucky Charms. I mean, the entire thing is a joke. Now, if you follow this, food pyramid like the government recommends, I can guarantee you, sooner or later, you will end up with a chronic disease. And I bet any money, if you eat this every single day, you will end up with type 2 diabetes. There's no other way. And then, because when people follow this food pyramid, you end up with chronic diseases. 75% plus Americans have at least one chronic disease today. That's 6 in 10. And 4 in 10 have multiple chronic diseases. If you ever asked yourself why did America have the highest COVID death, it's because of this. So many people were just sick to begin with, so it didn't take much. 70% of all deaths are caused by chronic diseases, such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, and the list goes on and on. And we also have to mention our healthcare spending. In 2024, we spent $4.7 trillion. I mean, the numbers are just insane. Imagine we would have healthy people in this country and we would save all this money and we could use it for, something more beneficial. That comes down to approximately $14,200 per person annually in America if you break it down. That's how much we spend. It's projected, and it's projected to go up to 7.5 trillion, which is 20% of our nation's GDP. And look on the right, from 2000 to 2035. I mean, it doesn't flatten out. In 2010, it flattened out a little bit, but then, it goes up and up and up. Now, ask yourself this question. We have the best medicine, we have the best doctors, right? We have the best technology and everything. Then why do we get sicker year after year? Ask yourself this question. Something is not working in this country. And it can be all traced back to this, the food chemicals in our nutrition. All right, let's start. We have way over 10,000 additives and pesticides in our food supply. To put that in perspective, in Europe, where I'm from, we have less than 400. That's a big difference. Some of the common additives are preservatives, sweeteners, colorants, emulsifiers. Preservatives is basically, there's an old saying, the longer the product survives on the shelf, the shorter will be yours. Preservatives are only here to increase the shelf life, but it will shorten yours. Artificial sweetener, we already know, they have issues, neurological issues, and also gut issues. Artificial colorants, Kennedy, thank God, removed some of them already, and they replaced them next year with natural sources. Emulsifiers are chemicals, to help bind products, such as if it's oil-based and water-based, it doesn't mix well, but with those chemicals added, mix perfectly. Then herbicides, we have glyphosate, also known as Roundup here in America. Now keep in mind, glyphosate is banned in most countries. And if it's not banned, it's heavily regulated. But here in America, not so much. We spray over 250 million pounds on our crops every single year, only in the United States. And that, of course, ends up, in our water, in the soil, and of course, in all the processed foods. Now, the problem is, the soil, because the bacteria that lives in the soil that's important for plants to, be nutritious, they get killed off. And that is one reason why, we have less nutritious food today. As an example, you have to eat 5 apples today to get to the same amount of vitamins and minerals like 50 years ago, where you only had to eat 1 apple to get to the same amount of 5 today. Now, think about this. And then there's an herbicide called astrazine. I want to talk about this one because this one is banned, in I think most countries, if not all of the countries. But here in America, we're still using it, even though there was a study where frogs got exposed to that herbicide and it literally turned male frogs to female frogs. Talking about a hormone disruptor, it literally changed their sex. Now, imagine what do you think it's going to do to us humans? We get exposed to all these chemicals, to all these herbicides and pesticides. If you can turn a frog to, male frog to female frog, I think it's safe to say if we get exposed to that decade after decade, it can have a huge impact on you. And we have if you think about it, transgenderism, is on the rise. Is it because of this? Maybe. Nobody has done a study, but I'm sure it adds to it. And then genetically modified crops. Yeah, 90% of all the crops in America are genetically modified. Corn, soybeans, canola, cotton, sugar beets, alfalfa, potatoes, apples, and so on. Now, you might say, what are you talking about? Here in America, they say that genetically modified crops have the same vitamins and minerals, the same, nutritious content, and, nobody dies from it. And studies have shown that it's safe. Again, you don't have to believe me. Just step back and look at the whole picture. Why are we the sickest country? Why do we have the most cancer cases in comparison to other countries where they don't use GMO? Here in America, all the studies they did on GMO crops, feeding them to the mice and to the rats, they only went on for 3 months. And after 3 months, there were no significant, side effects, and it was deemed to be safe. However, in Europe, in France, there was a famous study where that study went on for 2 years. And the rats and the mice, were exposed at those genetically modified crops. And guess what? After 9 months, 10 months, around that time, almost every rat had tumors growing the size of tennis balls. And that is one of many reasons why it's illegal in Europe. And in Russia, it's not just illegal, you literally go to jail for 20 years. And let's dive into more chemicals. Yeah, back to preservatives and nuisance fires and the additives. They also mess up your gut microbiome. And why is that important? Well, every disease starts in your gut. If your gut microbiome is out of balance, you have poor nutrition absorption, nutrient deficiency, and that is the first stepping stone of many health conditions. Like I said, artificial sweetener and dyes, they're linked to neurotoxicity and behavioral changes. They can literally, interfere with decision making. Seed oils, omega-6 fatty acids. I mean, the internet is full of it, right? Omega-6 fatty acids causes chronic inflammation, joint pain, and so on. But what is really the case here? Well, when we talk about omega-6 fatty acids, at its natural form, in plants and seeds, and nuts and that kind of stuff, it's not unhealthy. Where it becomes unhealthy is on how we process those seed oils. If you look up online how we process seed oils, then it all makes sense, right? Because we, extract the oil from the seeds, then we deodorize them, we bleach them, we use a toxic chemical like hexane to liquefy it, just to give you a few ideas of what's going on, and then it ends up on the shelf. So it's more like the way we process it. And then we have the pesticides. Think about this. They genetically modify plants so that they are resistant to glyphosate, the poison they spray. Have you seen online when they spray that poison, they have like a hazard suit on and they're spraying it. They're spraying poison on our food and we eat that? Hmm. And you can also look it up online. There's a huge class one action lawsuit going on because, they found out that glyphosate causes cancer. A lot of the workers, the same people that sprayed that poison our food, got cancer, lymphoma. And there's a huge lawsuit going on because, especially now, since they paid out $200 million to somebody, and now everybody's suing them. Sooner or later, it all comes out. You just have to, use common sense. Our bodies are not made to digest poison. The further we go away from Mother Nature, the sicker we get. And you can only go so far when it comes to make it cheaper, more profit, and so on. Maybe you can do that with a lot of things, but with us, human bodies, not. You will pay the price sooner or later. The next one, we have plastic, microplastic, PPAs, phthalates. Yeah, in my book, I have an entire chapter about this topic because this could be a book on its own. And honestly, I think if we don't get this pandemic under control, I think in the next 20 years, it will not have a happy ending. Think about this. Everybody, including myself, you can test yourself. We already have microplastic in our body, in our tissue. Every baby born today already has microplastic. So many women can't even get pregnant no more because there's microplastic, in the eggs, in the placenta, even in the brain. It crosses the brain barrier. And it's also, an estrogen mimicker. So when you have a lot of microplastic in your tissue, it increases estrogen. And we know estrogen and testosterone always balance each other out. So when estrogen goes up, testosterone going down. And you might know that we have another pandemic in this country of low testosterone. Man lost about 67% of its natural testosterone in the last 60 years. And I cannot tell you how many blood tests I was reading over the years from individuals, between 18 and 30. Their testosterone should be, 800 to 1500. And all I found was 300, 280, 400, 520. And then we have high sodium and MSG. MSG, again, is one of those chemicals they add to food to make it taste better. Every processed food has MSG in some shape or form, and they have hidden names for it, so we'll never say MSG. There's like 15 names, for that to confuse you. And then we have high sodium, can cause water retention and, gets your blood pressure up. However, we're talking about the sodium that's found in processed food. The sodium, the table salt that doesn't have any, nutritional value. However, if we're talking about high, no, lost it. If we talk about like sea salt, like Celtic or Baja salt, now these salts, they're high in minerals, 85 up to 90%. Now these can actually help you with, reducing your blood pressure and also help you with lowering the glucose in your body. So sodium can be bad if it's the wrong form, or it can be super healthy if it's the right form. And that goes for, almost everything, but you will see when we get to the food sources. And then we have synthetic flavor enhancer. They hijack the appetite and they make you eat more than you really need. I can give you my personal story. We lived about 2 hours away in Austria when I was a kid, from a McDonald's. And maybe once a month or once every 2 months, we were going there shopping and I had the chance to go to McDonald's. And imagine, if you only see McDonald's, every 2 months or so, you're going to eat, right? But I was surprised how much I could eat. I was 14 years old and I was eating 10 burgers. And out of the 10 burgers, 3 or 4 were Big Macs, and also, fries and everything. I was so full. I looked like a pregnant woman, but I didn't get that satiety feeling, that feeling that tells me, oh, you're full, you're good. I did not get that. Why? Because in processed food and fast foods, there's chemicals, added that temporarily inhibit the leptin pathway. The leptin is a hormone that gets released from your fats to the brain and tells you, hey, stop eating. We have enough. We have enough fat stored. But when you eat chips and cookies and burgers, or fries or anything like that, you don't get that. And that's why it's so easy to eat like 5,000 calories in a couple hours. But I dare you to try to eat or overeat on whole foods. You can't. You just can't. Because the whole food is so nutritious, has all the vitamins, minerals, and everything in there, that your body is like, okay, we got everything we need, stop eating. But you don't get that with processed food. No surprise, there's no nutrition in there. And then inflammatory ingredients, corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is sugar and steroids, like 5 times sweeter than regular sugar. Our human body is not even made to process the amount of sugar we consume today. But my next topic is about sugar, why it's not for human consumption. So let's skip this one for now. Hydrogenated oils. Those are oils that have been chemically altered to increase the shelf life. And we already know whatever increases the shelf life will shorten yours. And of course, they all speed up aging because anything that interferes with cellular function, speeds up the aging process. And it also means you get chronic diseases sooner. And processed carbs, yeah, processed carbs can be, anything like cookies, pasta, any kind of like, white bread, uh, uh, donuts, and that kind of stuff. See, I can't even come up with those names because they don't even exist in my reality. I don't even think about that kind of food, or pizza, and that kind of stuff, and all the sugars, right? So every time you eat something with a high glycemic index, your insulin gets released from the pancreas, and insulin's job is to take the sugar out, get it into the cells, and then, of course, because we consume so much, also into your fat. And that's how you get the nice belly. But it also blocks the fat burning process. Insulin is also known as the fat storing hormone for good reason, because our body is a glucose burning machine. Whenever glucose is available, it will block everything else and only burn glucose. So fat is nothing else than stored energy, like an emergency battery, we carry around. And the body will only use that if glucose is not available. Now, that can happen through fasting, that can happen through low carbohydrates, or that can happen through low calories, and on all the extra energy that's required, and the body already burned off all the food, then it has to take it from the fat. But let's face it, we eat plenty of calories every single day, and for the most part, we're just adding to the fat and not taking it off. And then it toxic burden on mitochondria. Same thing. Mitochondria creates ATP, which is our cellular energy. And if that goes down, if that's impaired, then of course, especially in the aging population, it's linked to sarcopenia. When you're tired, no matter how much coffee you drink, if your mitochondria isn't producing enough, ATP, you can drink as much coffee as you want. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to be tired. You're going to be lazy. You're not going to go in the gym. You're not going to walk. Nothing. And as a result, your health is going down, and you become fragile and you lose muscles. Also damages your DNA and telomeres. And if that happens, your biological aging speeds up. Telomeres is basically the end cap of your chromosome of your DNA that keeps the DNA together. And if you get exposed to those chemicals, it can cause DNA damage, including shorten the telomeres. And if you shorten the telomeres, sooner or later, it will cause cell death and it will be the end of you. And here's the topic, why sugar is not for human consumption. Now, I can talk about this for hours, but we only have so much time. So let's go over it. Before I start talking, just think about this. Go back 100 years, 200 years, even 1,000 years. When did we ever consume the amount of sugar we consume today? Never. An average American consumes between 60 to 100 grams of sugar a day, which comes up to about 160 pounds up to 200 pounds a year. I mean, those numbers are staggering. It's unbelievable. And of course, our bodies are breaking down. We are not made for that. Our system is not made for that. That's like having a Ferrari and putting the wrong cheap gas in there to save some money and expect that the Ferrari is going to last and also, like, drive as fast as it can. It doesn't work. Our body needs certain nutrients to function. Just like the Ferrari needs certain liquids and special high performing gasoline, to be able to function 100%. And yet, we're doing it right with the cars, but not with our human body. All right, so what happens? First is glycation. I'll give you an example so you'll never forget it. Let's say you go to a steakhouse, and you haven't eaten much. You eat your steak and a salad. The fat and the protein from the steak gets in your bloodstream, right? And then a waitress comes around and says, "Hey, can I offer you guys a dessert?" And you're like thinking, I didn't eat much today. I'm low in calories. Sure, give me a dessert. And now what happens? The sugar from the dessert also goes in the bloodstream and it starts binding with the proteins and the fats. We call that glycation. They start glycating, malforming, crystallizing, if you will, and they create something we call AGEs, advanced glycation end products. And these get deposited into your tissue and they break down your collagen and your elastins and you get sagging skin. When you see somebody that has like sagging skin and they tell you, "Hey, I got bad genes," it has nothing to do with genes. It's called glycation. And last week when I did a presentation, that was mostly for elderly people, and they said, "Well, I already have enough wrinkles. I don't care." I said, "Yeah, but you also have skin internally. You have an epithelia that protects all your organs, even all your arteries and veins, and that also gets affected." As a matter of fact, if you eat sugar every single day, 60 to 100 grams a day, you age 7 times faster, especially your skin. It also triggers chronic inflammation, which is the root cause of many modern diseases. It's linked to Alzheimer's and dementia. Guess what? We have a name for it now. It's called type 3 diabetes. I don't even have to explain nothing else. It already says it all. Type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's and dementia. Do you have to say anything else? It already tells you. It's caused by overconsumption of sugar. And that doesn't happen overnight. We're talking about years after years. Also causes insulin resistance. And of course, insulin resistance, think about this. Your pancreas releases insulin into your bloodstream to take out the glucose. Now you eat sugar or high glycemic carbs from the morning till the evening, every single day, years after years. Eventually, insulin gets exhausted and it can't do its job no more. And as a result, more insulin gets released in the bloodstream, but guess what? The glucose stays in the blood. And that, what we call, is prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Now, the good news is it's an easy fix. Prediabetes or type 2 diabetes is an easy fix. I've done it 1,000 times. All you have to do is cut the carbs, cut the sugar, a little bit of fasting, some of the supplements, and within like 3 to 4 weeks, you can bring your type 2 diabetes back to a normal range. And if the doctor tells you, "Oh, that's not possible, you need drugs," bullshit. And then it also increases the visceral fat, which is the fat between your organs. I'm sure you have seen that too. That fat acts like a cushion to protect your organs. But what happens if that fat is growing? It pushes your organs out. It can only go forward because we have the spine and the rib cage. And that's when you see like skinny individuals with like extreme belly that looks like they have a football under the shirt. Can also be inflammation, parasites, and all that stuff. And then it also messes up your microbiome. It feeds the harmful bacteria. Yes, if you eat a lot of sugar, you feed the bacteria that love the sugar, candida, yeast, and all that stuff. And when that happens, you have serious gut issues and you will get serious, health issues later on. Now, let's just call them, like, for better understanding, the good and the bad. The good bacteria, depending on what you have been eating the last 10 years, you will have an overgrowth of the good ones. And they're like, whole foods, the fibers and everything. And then, let's say for the last 10 years, you've been eating all the bad stuff and you feed, the candida, the yeast, and the bad bacteria. And they love the sugar and all that stuff. Now, either one, you will have an overgrowth, this or that. If you have an overgrowth of the bad ones, they will send signals to your brain, hey, where's the sugar? That's what you interpreted as cravings. Oh, I feel like eating a donut. Oh my God, I'm getting all dizzy and headaches. I need to eat something. Yeah, if you have that congratulation, that means you have food addiction, sugar addiction. And sugar addiction is just as real as a drug addiction. And then it depletes, this is my favorite, it depletes nutrients like magnesium, B vitamins, and chromium. Why do you think around Christmas time people get sick more often? My mom used to tell me, well, it's because it's cold. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm in a cold plunge like almost every day. If that would be the case, I would be sick every single day. But it's the opposite. No, it's because we consume a lot of sugar around the holidays. And every time you eat sugar, your immune system is compromised by approximately like 35% for at least 5 to 7 hours. At the same time, it also depletes magnesium, B vitamins, and chromium, the very nutrients the body needs for a strong immune system. And now, because you're eating sugar every day around the holidays, besides gaining weight, your immune system is compromised. And now you get exposed to like a disease to a microorganism, virus, bacteria, whatever. And now you get sick. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't even feel it because your immune system is running 100%. But now, because of all the sugar, it's compromised. And then also it feeds cancer cells. I mean, we've known this for a long time. Cancer loves sugar. The more sugar you eat, the faster cancer grows. I can actually tell you a real life story that just happened about 2 weeks ago. A friend of mine sent me not a patient, but referred me to somebody. He said, please, can you talk to them? His son has cancer. He's 22 years old. He's in Beverly Hills in hospital. He's not doing so well. So I talked to him, but I didn't know how bad it was. He was already stage 4 cancer, not doing so well. I couldn't even walk no more. And I told him, I said, well, it's kind of hard to help you because when you're in a hospital, you can't really do anything. Or if you can't even walk, how are you going to do a detox and everything? Anyways, I asked him, okay, tell me something, like what's going on, and also let me know what is he eating. And he says, oh, well, he's eating again, and he feels a little bit better. So to give him more energy, we give him ice cream every day. I said, what did he just say? Ice cream? He goes, yes, why? Didn't you know that, so didn't the doctors tell you that don't give them sugar? It feeds the cancer. I said, let me guess. Since you started eating and you give them sugar every day, the ice cream to get energy, let me guess, the cancer was just rapidly growing, right? He paused and said, yes. And I regret to say this, because I told him, you're literally killing him. And the very next day, he passed away. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, it's sad, but what can you do? Sugar also causes the energy crash and the mood swings. How many times you work in an office, people drink something with sugar, eat a donut, oh, they're happy, and then 30 minutes later, don't talk to me. Sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. It hits the same dopamine spike as cocaine. There was a interesting study. They had 20 rats locked up in a cage with sugar water, 20 rats locked up with cocaine water, left them in a few days, then they combined them and offered two options. And guess what happened? Only one rat went for the cocaine water. The rest went for the sugar water. Now, that should tell you something. Now, the only difference is that sugar is accepted and cocaine not so much. It also promotes fatty liver disease. Yes, I mean, it's because when you go to the doctor, your LDL, your cholesterol, and your triglycerides on the blood test is elevated. And you're like, I don't even eat fat. How's that possible? Well, it's not the fat, it's the sugar. Like we said before, the body is a sugar burning, machine, a glucose burning machine. And whenever that's available, it will always burn that. Now, you also eat, fat and protein. That's just normal. You need fat. You cannot live without it. However, when the body is always focused on burning the glucose because there's just so much available around the clock, it will never, touch the fat. And so what happens is the fat starts accumulating in the body. It gets stored in your waistline. It gets stored in the liver. It gets stored in the liver as triglycerides. It gets converted into triglycerides and fatty acids. And it also, stays, in the bloodstream. And now you go to the doctor and you have high, fat in your blood, high cholesterol, high LDL, high triglycerides. But the minute you stop eating the sugar and, get on a low carb diet, do a little bit of fasting, now the body is forced to use the fat and burn it as fuel because there's nothing else available. The body is like, imagine your favorite ice cream is chocolate. And no matter what you get offered, you will always go for chocolate. And only if chocolate is not available, now you're forced to choose something else. And that's how the body is. That's the relationship the body has with burning glucose and fat. And then once you do that, the body is, converting that triglycerides, the fat from the liver back to glycogen, burns it. Your waistline is shrinking because it also gets the fat out from there and burns it. And then, of course, the fat that's floating in your bloodstream also gets, burned. And yeah, it's actually, not as difficult as you think. And it also disrupts your hormone balance, like, estrogen, testosterone, but also cortisol. Try to eat a lot of sugar before you go to bed. It can activate cortisol, and cortisol is the hormone that wakes you up in the morning. It's elevated in the morning, and then, it slowly tapers off so that you can go to sleep. But if you eat a lot of sugar, especially if you go to bed, it can spike cortisol, and you won't have good sleep if you have sleep. Also speeds up, bone loss and muscle loss, especially in, the aging population. So look at the picture here, just to put that in perspective. How easy is it to get to 60 to 100 grams a day of sugar? If you just drink a couple of those, you're already up to 40, 50, 60 grams. And then you eat, other carbohydrates and some, junk food and some cookies, and you're already up there. It's so easy. The liquid soda that has the sugar is the most dangerous one. Why? Because you don't feel it. It doesn't satiate you. It doesn't keep you full. As a matter of fact, whenever you eat sugar, when you spike your insulin, you're going to eat double the calories that day because insulin spikes glucose goes up, everything goes up, eventually it has to come down. And when it comes down crashing, that's when you're like, oh my God, I don't feel good. I need to eat something. So what's the key message here? What we eat isn't just calories. It's information for yourself. And it's also what the body can do with the calories. Processed food causes inflammation, hormone disruption, diseases, and speeds up aging process. Real food, on the other hand, builds muscles, improves health, strengthens your immune system, and you get longevity. And now let's get to the portion why protein quality matters, especially as we age. Protein is not just protein. All proteins are not equal. The quality matters for muscle building and health. Older adults need more protein to maintain and build muscles because of anabolic resistance. And here, let's talk about the protein quality. Grass-fed versus conventional. I want to keep this short because we're running out of time. So grass-fed means that 6 months before they get slaughtered, they feed them grass fed. And before that, who knows, grains. Grass finished is supposed to mean that they were eating grass fed their entire life. Yeah, it's kind of confusing. There's so many loopholes. All right, let's see what the difference is between grass fed and conventional. Their diet is 100% pasture raised, natural grasses and herbs. And as a result, you get the omega-3 fatty acids and the CLA. These are fatty acids that help with anti-inflammatory agents. There's 3 times more CLA in grass-fed, and that actually also you can buy it in supplement form because the CLA actually helps with fat metabolism and also for immune function. There's no antibiotics and no hormones. There's no exposure to glyphosate or any kind of GMOs and pesticides. You get the muscle-building nutrients from that meat, such as creatine, carnitine, zinc, selenium, vitamin E, and B12. And the fat, there's less fat in grass fat, they're leaner. However, that fat is the good quality because that fat has the CLA and high omega-3 fatty acids, which you want and need. And because they're free roaming around, so there's less cortisol, less stress, and they're happy cows. On the other hand, if you eat conventional, their diet consists of corn, soy, wheat byproducts, animal waste, and candies, and so on. Again, the very things you're trying to escape because they feed them with corn. That means you're exposed to glyphosate, to all those pesticides, even the wheat product. Who would think that, they feed them with wheat? And in some cases, if you have celiac disease and, you get exposed, who knows what they feed them? I mean, you don't even know, right? But gluten, just a tiny amount of gluten can cause a reaction. And then also they fatten them up before they get slaughtered with candy and animal waste products, which is cheap, and then you consume them. And as a result, the omega-3 are low, and you get the high omega-6 fatty acids, which you don't want in a huge amount. And there's no to maybe a little bit of CLA, and you get exposed to the growth hormones and the antibiotics. Now imagine you have a cancer cell growing, and you're not aware of it. You consume sugar every day, and you eat conventional meat that has growth hormones. I mean, your cancer will grow like there's no tomorrow. So, and we have cancer cells growing, every day, but our immune system, is fighting it off. But, if your immune system's compromised because we're consuming all the sugar and all that stuff, right? And you're not healthy, and you consume conventional meat and sugar, and you have a cancer cell, it can accelerate the growth. And again, you get exposed to the GMO grains that have glyphosate and pesticides. The micronutrients, the ones you need for muscle growth, are less. There's less creatine, carnitine, zinc, selenium, B vitamins, B12, and the fat. They're more saturated, and the fat stores all the toxins. So in this case, those fats store the glyphosate, the pesticides, and all the toxins they get exposed to. And on top of that, they're confined. A lot of times they don't even see the sun. They're high stress, and as you can imagine, high cortisol. And you eat that. Oh, right here. And here, the same goes for eggs, pasture-raised organic versus the regular. Pasture-raised eggs, the diet consists of grass, bugs, organic seeds, worms, and so on. And as you know, and the chickens run around outdoor, in the sun, less stress, natural behavior, and as a result, they produce eggs that are high in omega-3 fatty acids, and they're high in the vitamin D, E, B12, A, and choline. And there's no antibiotics in those chickens, and there is no glyphosate, pesticides, and heavy metals. And you can actually, taste the differences because the flavor is so much better. And you can see the deep orange yolk, which is a sign that it's high in carotenoids. And carotenoids are great for your eyes. It even protects you from blue lights and improves your eyesight. It's anti-inflammatory fats. Those are the fats you want to consume that help you for longevity. And again, and you get the cheap eggs. They're like $2 or $3 a dozen. And that diet consists of the same things, just like the cows, the corn, the soy, the grain-based fats. And then again, you get exposed to the GMO sprayed, stuff like glyphosate. And they're confined indoors. They don't even see the sun, very limited space, no sunlight. And as a result, you get low omega-3 fatty acids and high omega-6. Less vitamins, because of the fat and no sunlight. And again, they're exposed to antibiotics, and they have higher residues, again, of the food chemicals. The fat profile is less quality and high inflammatory, fats and everything. And you can see here on the left, pasture-raised, outdoors, natural diet. And you can see that's dark orange. That's the good one. The one in the middle, those are the eggs, that cost like $2 a dozen. Those are the ones you want to, avoid because, they're grain fat. You get exposed to all those chemicals and there's no sunlight. So there's less vitamin D and all the other vitamins. And then on the most very common are the ones on the right, which you can see there's like a mix, of grain fat and, pasture raised. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think you get the idea now. The same goes for, fish, wild caught versus farm raised. Again, wild caught fish eat the natural prey, the God-given food, what they're supposed to eat. The small fish, the krill, the plankton, and so on. And as a result, you get the omega-3. And by the way, fish is the highest quality of omega-3 fatty acids, the EPA and the DEA. That's something you have to have like every single day. And again, there's low exposure toxins. The omega-3 fatty acids are high, the omega-6 are low. Usually, a ratio from like 3-to-1 or 5-to-1. And the protein quality is great, very bioavailable, and there's no growth hormone or chemicals. And then the farm raised, we feed them again with the pellets that are made from soybean, the rapeseed meal, the gluten, the poultry products, and dyed fish meal. As you can see, whenever we interfere with the natural environment, when it comes to nutrition, when we feed them, as a result, we get the bad stuff, and then we get sick. You're trying to do everything right, and yet you don't know what they feed them, and you get exposed to the very things, all the glyphosate, all the wheat products, all the gluten you're trying to escape, and you even get that through a fish. And then again, you get exposed to the antibiotics, antifungal medication. They also have artificial colorants, like farm-raised salmon. Yes, it tastes good, but that orange color is actually, not natural. And there's higher residues of the PCBs, the dioxin, and the pesticides. High omega-6 fatty acids again. The protein quality is not so good. There's less essential amino acids. And you're exposed to more of the heavy metals like mercury and cadmium. And even if you go for protein source, again, it goes back to the same thing. Eat grass-fed organic whey protein because of the quality of the protein and the chemicals that are in there, right? You have the complete proteins, all 9 essential amino acids, the high in leucine. Leucine is a key amino acid that triggers protein synthesis, in other words, building muscle. It's also part of the BCAAs. They are fast absorbing, which is great for post-workout. They're also rich in immunoglobulins and lactoferrins for immune system. They're higher bioavailability, and less is needed to have a great effect when it comes to muscle gaining. Again, grass-fed cows, they have the good, clean fat, no hormones and no antibiotics. And if you go for the conventional one, you get exposed to artificial sweeteners, the filler, and the heavy metals, and so on. Same goes for, plant-based. It doesn't protect you there. Same thing. Make sure that it's organic and non-GMO. Otherwise, you get exposed to the same chemicals. They are often incomplete proteins. They must be combined with others because there's less essential amino acids in there. They are low in leucine content, which means it doesn't stimulate muscle growing as much. They're slow absorbing, which doesn't make it ideal for post-workout, but you still can do it. And it usually requires 30 to 40% more of the total intake of the protein to match whey protein. Best sources is, again, organic, non-GMO from soy, quinoa, buckwheat, hemp, pea, chia. Spirulina is one of the best, one of the most nutritious, ingredient you can find. And some plant proteins, such as rice and pea, may contain heavy metals, so make sure that it's tested for that. And it's a good alternative if you're sensitive to dairy. All right, the last chapter, longevity tips for adults. Actually, not just for adults, also for you in the 30s or 40s. Here's just some basic, simple principles. Prioritize protein for muscle growth, especially in the aging population. Aim for like 1.2, 1.5 grams per pound. So if you're 150 pounds, you can consume somewhere between 100 to 120 to 150 grams of carbs, especially if you're like 50, 60, or 70 years old. But make sure that your kidney can handle it. So make sure that you get it confirmed from your doctor. If your kidney is functioning well, you can do it. Strength training. Train like 3 times per week. Maintain muscle and bone density. That will help you from breaking your hip when you fall. Move daily. Walk 7,000, 10,000 steps, or even more. Because movement equals longevity. And even if it's just, going around the block or going around the building, anything is better than nothing. It's also recommended to, after you eat, to do a little bit of activity. If you're indoor, do like 15 squats or, go for a walk because that helps to lower the blood sugar and it also improves your insulin sensitivity. Sleep 7 to 8 hours, 9 hours. Everything happens, all the magic happens when you sleep. The body repairs, grows, rejuvenates, and also the detoxification pathways turn on. Brain detox, liver detox, and so on. Make sure that you sleep. Yeah, if you live in Arizona where I live, it's not so easy because it's so freaking hot. But make sure that the temperature in the room should be like 67, 68. That's when you get the best sleep, where it's actually cold and you have to cover yourself. The darker the room, the better you sleep. Trust me, I've done that myself. It's amazing how much better you sleep. Avoid screen time an hour before bedtime because of the blue light, which can trigger, confusing your brain that it's daylight, and then it releases cortisol, thinking, oh, it's daylight, wake him up. But you can have those blue glasses, they can help you with that. Eat real food. By now, if you watch the entire thing, you should know how important it is to eat organic, grass-fed, pasture-raised, wild caught. Avoid all the ultra-processed food because it will cause inflammation and chronic diseases. Hydrate. Drink clean filtered water or spring water. Avoid the sugary drinks. There's no use for that. All you're going to do is when you drink sugary drinks, you're going to eat more food and you add more calories and you spike your insulin over and over again. And eventually you might get insulin resistance. And limit the coffee in the morning. Well, I mean, if it's ideally is when you wake up not to drink coffee right away. I mean, I do it too because I have to go to work. But, it's okay. It's good to let first cortisol do its job. And then an hour, 2 hours later, when it goes down, then drink the coffee. Then you will have a much better effect. Manage the stress. Yeah, chronic stress, we know speeds up aging, inflammation, diseases. Practice breathing, prayer, gratitude, connect with loved ones. Get sunlight and go into nature. Daily morning sun is the best sun. There's no harmful UV radiation the first 45 minutes when the sun comes out. It boosts your mood, It helps with your circadian rhythm. Vitamin D helps with methylation, and it just makes you feel good to be in the sun. That's why when you go to the beach and then you come home, oh my God, you feel so relaxed and good. Don't avoid the sun. I don't even know where it came from that, we treat the sun like, the devil. The sun causes cancer. Sun is so bad for you. Again, don't believe me. Just think about, go back 100, 200,000 years. We didn't have a sunscreen or anything like that. Did we all die from skin cancer? No. So why all of a sudden we have that now? Well, it has more to do with the chemicals we get exposed to externally and internally. The crap we're eating, the lotion, the potion, the makeup, and everything we spray in us and put in our skin, and then you go in the sun. The sun, like, penetrates everything, into the blood. Yeah, I mean, that's a different story. And maintain purpose and social connection. In longevity, that is so important. So we found out that 20% of our genome is set in stone. That means it's going to create the way you look, your hair color, your eye color, your height. We cannot change that. However, we found out that 80% is epigenetics, and epigenetics we can influence. Those 80% is basically up to you. How fast you're going to age and how fast you're going to get age-related diseases. Because those 80% epigenetics responds to lifestyle, nutrition, having a positive outlook in life, having a great community around you, and being needed. Create that need to be here. How many times did you see that, the partner, the husband or the wife, pass away? Most of your friends are already gone, and you don't find no purpose no more. And you don't have the need no more to be here. You don't have a job. And how many times did you see that after the husband or, the wife dies, and then the other partner dies shortly after? Yeah, it's because of that. And so that's why I always find a reason to be here. The need, created need. It doesn't have to be like a strong need, making $1 million. No, just a need to be here. Like, go to church, or be part of a community, or help people, or, provide a service, tell them about your journey or whatever you used to do. Like now with social media, so many things, you can do. Like I do it right now, right? I'm sharing, my knowledge with you so that you can have a better life and make the right choices. Anything like that, helps. Avoid toxins. Yeah. There's an interesting phenomena we call the rain barrel effect. The minute you're born and you're exposed to our environment and you drink water and you eat, you get exposed to toxins every single day. And the rain barrel effect is basically the rain barrel is, resembles your body. And every day a few drops of water goes into the barrel. And eventually the barrel is going to fill up. And when it gets there and it starts, and it starts spilling over and makes a mess, that's when you get diseases. Heart disease, cancer, who knows, any chronic disease, health issues, eczema, skin issue. And that's why it's so important to always empty that barrel. Don't let that toxic load go all the way to the top, because that's when things go wrong. And if you ever ask yourself, oh, when I'm just young, I got away with everything. I did this and this and this and that. And now I'm like, 50 or 60, it doesn't work no more. It's just age. No, stop saying it's just age. It's because of the toxic load you have in your system, and your body is not able to repair no more because the toxic load is just too much. But when you lower the toxic load and always keep it low, or maybe even empty, then the body can heal and repair itself as you were young. But it needs all the raw ingredients to do so. And that's why it's important to avoid the toxins and eat healthy. And when I say toxins, I mean the plastic, the smoking, the alcohol, the pollutants in our environment, the cleaning supply you have at home. The makeup you put on, the perfume you put on, everything the air freshener in your car are all considered toxic material to your body. And then keep your brain active, learn new skills, read, do puzzles, play music, anything, keep your brain engaged. 5 years ago, I made myself a goal that every day I have to learn something new, whether I'm reading a book or I'm sharing information or, I'm writing a book, which I did, or listen to podcasts or anything we can learn. You can sit in the car, you can choose to listen to music or you can listen to a podcast, maybe to my podcast here, or anything, right? And so I kept it up for the last 5 years, I would say 90% of the time. And that brings us to the end. Longevity is not just living long, it's living strong, healthy, and happy. Small daily changes can lead to big health outcomes over time. If this information was, a lot for you, this is a recording, so you can always go back. However, keep in mind, small changes can go a long way. I always keep telling my younger patients and clients, whatever you do now will determine on how you're going to retire. Are you going to end up in a nursing home and you can't move around no more? Or are you going to be 75 years old, still go hiking and play tennis? And I know quite a few. He's actually 85 and he's still playing tennis every day for 2 hours. He goes hiking for 1 hour. And he also is part of a community where they play, games with each other every single day at 85. Now, if he can do it, you can do it. Thank you. And if you have any questions or concern, leave me anything in the comment. You can go to my website, arizonanutritionist.com. You can read more in my description. I also do free consultations, if you're interested in talking about your journey and how I can help you. So just go to the website, set it up on the calendar, and we can set up a talk and can chat about everything to see if this program fits for you or how we can help you. Thank you for watching and share this information because I know there's people that need to hear this. Thank you.